I'm going to just introduce this topic, transit-oriented urbanism, which you might notice that I'm not using the term transit-oriented development. I'm doing that deliberately because I've been thinking about this quite a lot, and I thought, although it might seem like a subtlety, this session's really about something a lot bigger and in some ways more complicated than TOD, or transit-oriented development. We all know great urban places are inherently transit supportive, and conversely we know that transit thrives in great urban places, but high-quality urban places, those that are necessary for transit to thrive in, are not just the result of development or the capital D in TOD. And so today we're going to really talk about the full urbanism as we understand it in CNU, which is the result of a lot of attention paid to the public realm and urban form and physical things, but also it's a lot of attention paid to the soft things like grassroots advocacy, tactical urbanism, local business cooperation, government strategies. And when you have all these things in place, working together, transit and urbanism can thrive, and they build on each other, and urbanism gets better, transit gets better. It's a kind of circle. And most of you know that this is explained in our charter, and you're all familiar with the single-page version. This is the old book version of the charter, which has a wonderful essay in it about TOD by my friend and colleague in Portland, G.B. Arrington. He wrote it in 1999, and the new charter book with a green cover has just been published and is available at CNU desk. By the way, it's a fundraiser for CNU if you buy a copy. It has a new and updated essay by G.B. Arrington in it, but he has basically the same message, which is that maximizing choice and mobility in our communities starts with the pedestrian because every trip begins and ends with walking. Since 1999, when he wrote that, there have been a number of new urbanists who've added to the body of our knowledge about the importance of walkability, and one I highly recommend is Jeff Beck's book, Walkable City. Transit works best when it builds off of a high-quality, attractive, walkable urbanism because it extends the range of places within which you can travel. Each transit mode offers a different range. Like streetcar extends your walk, kind of like a horizontal elevator, as I've heard a friend of mine, Chris Smith in Portland, describe it. Light rail can traverse corridors and cities, covers longer distances, and then really kind of longest of all is commuter rail that connects distant destinations within regions. And I don't want to leave bus or BRT out of there either, which operate quite a lot like light rail. I think an extremely articulate writer on the topic of transit modes and networks is Jarrett Walker, the author of Human Transit, How Clear Thinking About Transit Can Enrich Our Communities and Our Lives. And he and I both live in Portland and talk a lot. He's helped me understand that the end goal of transit choices, which is basically giving you choices and getting around, is not a function of the transit, but how the network is set up. He talks about understanding the transit network geometry and defining the desired urban form before you ever select the precise transit mode, meaning that before you decide whether it's streetcar, light rail, bus, BRT, or commuter rail. The end goal of transit is to provide choice, abundance, and freedom, and that really depends on how well the network works and how frequent your service can be. And that's what this drawing is all about. This is a drawing from the little blue book, The Sustainable Street Network Principles, published by CNU last year. And I love this drawing because it shows this person using a smartphone to try to figure out how to get the last mile home from his trip, and right in front of him are a lot of different choices to do that: biking, walking, a cab, a bus. Presumably there's a commuter rail train on the other side of that terminal building. And this, that last illustration is actually from this book, as I mentioned, which is also free at the CNU desk. We published this last year. Norman Garrick and I have been chairing the Project for Transportation Reform Working Group. It's part of the CNU for the last few years, and this is our latest publication. In the book, we try to illustrate 7 principles and 6 key characteristics about good urbanism. So on to the projects that our speakers are going to talk about today. One of these is the Modern Streetcar Land Use Project in Tucson, which I've been really fortunate to be involved in, even though I live in Portland. I get to go to Tucson in actually a week where I'm going to experience your 110-degree weather. In January of this year, we held a 6-day charrette to determine the land use and implementation plan in collaboration with the community, and these are images from the charrette. On the lower left are all the notes that were taken from meetings, which we put into a database and quantified, and on the lower right is one of the meetings taking place. So Tucson Streetcar links the downtown and the university, and I'm going to let Donovan and Emily talk about the project more. But here's just a first look at the existing land use and the streetcar line overlaid on it. You can see the patchwork of land uses and character areas, each one a different color. And one of the challenges in this project has been tuning the implementation plan for the streetcar to each one of these unique character areas, which means that each area has potentially different approach to land use, urban form, public realm improvements, and parking. And this will be talked about more by our speakers. Tucsonans call this little shape here, the streetcar walk shed, the caterpillar.
It hasn't caught on fully yet.
Okay. Only some people use that term. But on the opening night of the charrette, the design team did a really smart thing, and they included a table that compares basic characteristics of commuter rail and light rail to streetcar, so that we could help people understand that streetcar has unique operating characteristics, and that those would dictate a lot about the public realm and urban form. And when it comes to parking, for instance, since the streetcar works as a walk extender, as I mentioned before, we needed to do a little education about what that means for parking, because a lot of people assume that streetcar would kind of work like commuter rail or even like light rail, but it doesn't, and that it would need park and rides, lots or garages at each end. But we helped explain how streetcar works in cities like Portland, where I come from, and that you park once and you use the streetcar to extend your walk. You disperse parking of all kinds along the streetcar. You inventory your parking supply and you manage it, including managing parking costs. And for Tucson, this means a probably slightly difficult transition to no more free parking, and I'm sure Donovan's going to talk about that. I want to stress that getting the parking right is probably the single most important thing after getting the streets and the transit right. Yeah, I've worked in a lot of cities and on a lot of transit plans, and parking was never part of the discussion. So I'm really excited to have this be part of an actual segment of this presentation. We have 3 speakers here today to talk about how they're bringing high-quality urbanism to Austin and Tucson. In Austin's case, it's really urbanism in advance of rail transit, and maybe bus transit too. And in Tucson, it's in tandem with a streetcar. So let me just introduce everybody now, and then they can come up sequentially. Chris, and then Donovan, and then Emily. Okay. Chris Riley serves on the Austin City Council. He was elected at large in 2009 and re-elected in 2011, and his current term runs until January 2015. He also serves on the boards of Capital Metro and Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, and prior to his election, he worked as an attorney, was actively involved in civic issues. He co-founded the Downtown Austin Neighborhood Association in '97 and served on Austin's Planning Commission for 6 years, including 2 years as chair. He also served on numerous other city boards and task forces. He's been deeply involved in a number of local nonprofits, including Austin Car Share. Yeah, that's the one I wanted to mention. He's a graduate of Harvard College and University of Texas School of Law. And as I understand it, you're one of the first Austinites to go car-free. Is that right?
First council members, anyway.
Great. One of the first council members to go car-free. So Donovan Durbin is Parkways Program Administrator at the City of Tucson, Arizona. He has 3 degrees from the University of Arizona, Urban Planning, Ecology and Evolutionary Biology, and Economics. He was the Executive Director of the Tucson Downtown Alliance from '99 to 2008, and then worked for 2 years for council on a variety of things, including downtown development, transportation, and other things. Since 2012, he's been the administrator of the City of Tucson's Parkways program, which manages the city's parking assets, including 6 parking structures, several surface lots, 1,400 parking meters, neighborhood permit programs, other on-street permit programs, such as around the University of Arizona campus, and citywide parking code enforcement. And Donovan was active in the grassroots effort to bring the modern streetcar to Tucson. And then the third speaker will be Emily Yatman. She's an executive director. She is the executive director of Living Streets Alliance, and founder, I should say, a Tucson-based nonprofit organization focused on improving alternative modes of transportation in the area and emphasizing streets as public space with the potential to cultivate a vibrant urban environment. She received her Master of Landscape Architecture degree from the University of Arizona in 2011, where she explored the potential for creating bicycle-friendly downtown and analyzed connectivity and access for all different types of bicycle users. While pursuing her master's, she became focused on streets as the most abundant form of publicly owned space within the city and one of the best opportunities to improve the quality of life for Tucson residents. While she was in her final semester, she founded the Living Streets Alliance, a 501c3 organization that's played a major role in bringing walkability and bikeability into the public conscience. One of her goals for Living Streets Alliance is to increase the retention of young professionals, families, and the creative class in Tucson by improving the urban form and increasing the opportunities to live in car-free, car-light urban lifestyle. Last year, she received a prestigious 40 Under 40 award, recognizing her work as a young leader and visionary in Tucson. So we have an incredible group of people here, as you can tell. Next up, Chris. Do you want this up here, or do you want it in your hand?
Will it work up there?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. Y'all hear me okay? Thanks so much, Marcy, for the introductions, and thanks to y'all for sticking around with us. It is a real pleasure to be here. I'm a big fan of CNU, and I love this topic because after 20 years as CNU, we all have some idea of what we want to see in an urban setting. The hard part is figuring out how to get there, and every city experiences that a little differently. I get to tell you a little bit about Austin's experience in working its way towards an urban vision. I want to thank my aide, Leah Bojo, here, who's helped me pull this together. Y'all have heard a lot about what's going on in Austin, I suspect. It's been making a lot of top 10 lists, a lot of exciting stuff going on. We've got South by Southwest and the Austin City Limits Music Festival and so on. And yet something seems to be missing. As Andres Duani mentioned the other day, 200 bars is not urbanism. Something is lacking there, and we all know what it is. I'm reminded of it every time I come to a city like this and get on a train at the airport and zip right into downtown. You won't be doing that in Austin anytime soon. We have had difficulty getting rail transit going on a large scale, and I want to take a minute at the outset to give you some context for what's going on with that and why we've had some challenges. This is a little timeline showing a recent history of transit here in Austin, and it really starts, the recent history goes back to 2000 when we had this great urban light rail proposal going right down our main transit corridor through the University of Texas and down through downtown. Unfortunately, that wound up on the ballot in November of 2000. And if y'all remember, that was the same ballot when George W. Bush was running for president. If it had just been Austin voters, that would have been fine, because Austin voters, the urban rail proposal was overwhelmingly popular along the line and was supported in the city overall. But unfortunately, the election covered the whole metro service area. There was a strong opposition campaign run on the slogan, "Cost too much, does too little," and the opposition, especially in outlying areas, was enough to defeat it. It was this close. Out of over 300,000 votes, we lost by less than 2,000, far less than 1%, which was a pretty severe blow. In trying to recover from that, we came ahead with a much smaller scale election involving an old freight line that we had. That we already had the right-of-way and everything. So in 2004, we put that to the voters. It was a $100 million project for commuter rail, 32 lines, 32 miles, 6 cars, and we got that approved in 2004, started operation in 2010. It's actually been very successful, but again, the capacity is very limited. We're up at about 3,000 riders a day, and we're going to have a very hard time getting much beyond that because it's single track. We can run about 30-minute headways at peak hours, but that's about all we can do. We do have some positive things on the horizon. We will be launching a bus rapid transit line in January of next year, based on a very small starts grant we got for $50 million. That BRT line will go on roughly the same route that we had that we were going to cover with urban rail in 2000. Now that's creating some issues as we look ahead to another light rail or urban rail election that we also hope to get going next year. Of course, now we've got the detractors saying it really ought to be back on that same 2000 line, and the problem is we've got that BRT line, so we've got issues to work through even among rail supporters. So the future is not clear on getting additional rail in place in Austin. And so in the meantime, we've got some issues to work with. We've got to figure out how to make progress in the meantime, even though the future of rail is uncertain. But there are good things about that challenge. One is that Austin is generally very supportive of transit. In fact, we have the highest per capita ridership in the state of Texas, even ahead of Dallas and Houston, both of which have rail lines in place. Austin has reacted well to the rail line that we have, that red line. We've seen very strong increases in ridership up to the point where it's at capacity now. Bus ridership continues to grow, so that's all going good. And the other thing that's very interesting about Austin is that we are growing so dang fast that there are all kinds of possibilities for new development coming in. We have an opportunity, essentially we've got an opportunity to rebuild the whole city because of how fast we're growing. We are right at the top of the list as of 2011 to 2012. And that is not a historic anomaly. In fact, we have been growing fast for a long time. Ever since World War II, we've been doubling in size roughly every 25 years or so. And so the projections are pretty striking. It's a historic annualized growth rate of 3.7%, and that pace, we have an incredible opportunity to remake our urban environment, more so than any other major city in the U.S. We can actually recreate the city just in our lifetimes. And so it's a very exciting to think about what we could actually do while we're working on getting additional rail measures in place. And so that really leads me to the model that we've been undertaking. And when you think about incremental TOD, in some cities you might envision getting a rail line in place and then building out around that rail line. We have some limited opportunities to do that with our red line, but really if we want to really have a significant effect on the whole city, we're going to have to do more than that. We're going to have to be putting density first and figuring out how to get density along those areas where we would like to have rail in the future. And that's where there's all kinds of interesting stories to tell about how that's going. And I want to focus in on 4 examples in particular, starting with downtown. This was a particular interest to me. I have been downtown for a long time now and was able to witness and participate in some of these things that we've been working on. Around the same time, a lot of other cities in the U.S. were going through revitalization of their downtowns. We experienced the same thing in Austin. We had a smart growth matrix that incentivized solid downtown development in '98. Downtown design guidelines really trying to promote better pedestrian and conditions in 2000, and a Great Streets master plan that promoted all that great urban stuff in 2002. And so what we saw as all that stuff came together and there was more and more interest in revitalizing downtown is an incredible resurgence of our downtown. We had been experiencing, like a lot of cities in the U.S., we had been experiencing a decline in our downtown population ever since about World War II, and we had really been stagnant since about 1980. But starting in 2000, when these new projects started coming online, we really turned it around. We're now up to about the kind of residential population that we had back in 1950. We've got enough in the pipeline to get us beyond where we were even back before World War II. And the goals we're talking about for downtown are up around 25,000 residents. And we're actually making great progress on that. Projects are still, if you visit downtown right now, you'll see all kinds of cranes. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on right there downtown. Downtown is easy for a lot of cities because transit, you don't really need that much transit. Getting around without a car is no problem, especially now that we've got Car2Go and Zipcar. There's really no need to have a car. It's a really easy win there. So then the next question is, well, what else are you going to do other than downtown? And the first place to look to is the University neighborhood, which is a very interesting case because that's directly north of downtown. We've got an area just to the west of our campus. The University of Texas has a student population of over 50,000. You got an area just to the west of campus where students were historically, but over time, over the past few decades, they had kind of abandoned that west campus area. And so the challenge was what can we do right in that area to bring them back, to rebuild a community right there. And what we did was we put this overlay in place to encourage a rebirth of that area. They called it the University Neighborhood Overlay, allowed for greater heights in various districts, getting up to 175 feet, and we really included in the overlay all sorts of conditions that under which we would allow for those greater entitlements. And that included things like affordable housing, ground level retail, better sidewalks and lighting, and decoupled parking. This was all very exciting stuff. We had for affordable housing, we put in place a two-tier approach. We required 10% and 80% of median family income, and then a second tier that hit deeper affordability, of which you could cover with a fee in lieu, which allowed for additional development of affordable housing in the area. We had decoupled parking was a particularly exciting one because you know, that's an area where you really don't want students to have to be expected to come into the neighborhood with a car. The idea is it ought to be a neighborhood where students don't have to have a car, and if they don't have to have a car, why should they be paying for the parking for other people that choose to bring cars? And so we required, as a condition of participating in these greater entitlements, we required that parking be decoupled. If you take a space in one of those new projects, you will pay separately for parking. The parking will be charged separately from your regular lease. That was kind of a foreign concept at the time, but now it has become so widespread that it's been embraced even by projects which predated the overlay, and now projects outside of that area are adopting it as well. And it really opens the door to urban settings for people who choose to go car free. They no longer have to subsidize those who do have cars. They no longer have to subsidize the parking for those other folks. This has all been incredibly successful in that West Campus area. It really was like lighting a match to a tinderbox in there. We saw essentially a doubling of the student population in that West Campus area. It did stabilize during the last downturn, but it's back underway now. And we have a lot of cranes doing some great, very dense projects there in the West Campus area. So that was a very successful. But again, that was a kind of a captive population, a very easy area to do. Another easy area to do in some ways was an area not far from downtown where our airport used to be, just in the northeast part of town. And that's many of y'all may have heard of this. It's our Mueller Development. It used to be the airport, 700 acres. We worked with the neighborhoods around there for many years to develop a vision for what we would have there. It was a fairly new urbanist vision with a very dense pedestrian-oriented housing, multiple forms of housing to choose from, a town center. The image on the lower left is affordable housing for seniors. There's a lot of great stuff, and people just ate this up. It's been tremendously popular, and people living there just love it. They love being able to walk around and greet their neighbors on the street. It really has set a very positive tone for urban-style development in Austin because people have enjoyed it so much. And significantly, it was designed with the expectation of rail. So we had certain density targets without rail. We provided room for rail to come through, and actually provided expressly that we would allow for additional density once that rail arrives. And as a result, we've got people in that neighborhood clamoring for rail. They are very eager to get rail into that area. Now again, that was another case of low-hanging fruit because it was a big brownfield development. There was issues to work through with it as to how we were going to build it out, but it was fairly straightforward to get a plan in place and build it out. But that is not going to be enough, obviously, to accommodate the kind of growth we're experiencing. In order to accommodate significant parts of the growth that we're getting and distribute it all over town, we are going to have to go beyond that low-hanging fruit and look to our corridors. And that's where it starts getting more challenging. Because like a lot of cities in the West, our corridors tended not to be very pedestrian-oriented places. Our corridors are largely a lot of just strip retail, and these are the sorts of places that make Dwani say Austin is not such a great place for urbanism, because it is very they are very car-oriented areas. We started working in 2006 to put commercial design standards in place to kind of change the whole picture for that sort of development, trying to move buildings to the street, focusing on better pedestrian conditions. We also put in place, allowed for vertical mixed zoning, requiring a mix of uses in affordable housing, but providing that if you do that, there'd be no FAR limit and there'd be reduced parking requirements. These have actually, there's been some bugs in these provisions, but in generally, we have seen significant demand for this kind of development along corridors. South Lamar right now is a particularly exciting one because this is not one of your more pleasant places. This is not like downtown or West Campus or Miller. This is a very auto-intensive corridor, and yet we're seeing very urban-style developments go up all along that corridor. This is about 1,300 units going up within just a couple blocks of each other. Very urban orientation to all of that, and being very well received so far. We're doing similar work on another corridor in the northeast part of town, Airport Boulevard. This is an interesting case because it is actually served by our red line, which is that capacity. It's also we got together with the neighborhoods around there. They really wanted to see a transformation of that corridor, and they have been working on the development of a form-based code that would support a transformation of the corridor, and they are very excited about seeing a kind of a reversal of the fortune for that corridor. They really want to see a more urban orientation. One particularly interesting element there is that red splotch you see in the middle, which is our Highland Mall, our first big mall outside downtown, which was a dying mall for some years. It has recently been bought by Austin Community College. It is now going to be their flagship campus, and all those acres of asphalt surrounding it that were the parking, those will be developed as some dense mixed-use development. So that will be kind of an anchor. And sure enough, there is a rail stop right there by that, so that which hopefully we will eventually figure out how to expand the capacity of the line, and it will be able to support that. So very exciting prospects for that corridor there. And all of this will fit together. If we can do things like this along all of our corridors, then it will all fit together. So someday we will be able to have a transit map like this. This is the vision that we are working towards. And you can see how the places that I've been talking about will be well served by all these things. You can see the red line coming down here, the red line along serving Airport Boulevard. We can see the rapid bus in green coming right down by West Campus and down South Lamar. We've got all kinds of rail and bus lines that will be serving all these things. So we do have a bright transit future if we can all get this in place. When we are paving the way for this. And hopefully we will make additional progress next year. We've got this here. This map shows our current red line right there, and we hope to have some line on the ballot next year, which will connect downtown destinations and go on up and connect over to Miller. So it is we are poised to make some very good progress towards that vision. Let's see. In the meantime, in addition to working on all these specific projects, we are also making progress on general concepts that are going to have to apply in any place where we want to have a more urban environment. And one of those big issues, I'm glad Marcy mentioned it because it's a huge issue that any city is going to have to reckon with, especially cities in the West that were built out around the car. Parking is just an enormous issue. Almost every council meeting we have some new parking initiative on it. It's driven largely by Donald Shoup's work, which Donovan will be talking about. And I won't go through each of these things, but other than to say that this is a very hot issue in Austin. We've been getting better about charging market rates, directing proceeds back to the area, reducing parking minimums. In fact, we've now eliminated all our parking minimums in the downtown area. We're working on requiring decoupling, offering parking cash out, and in general trying to mitigate the effects of parking on the urban environment. We're also doing things to provide connections that make it easier to get around in the absence of rail. Better bike facilities are a key part of it. We hope to be launching bike share later this year. We're actually seeing tremendous progress as a result of all the bike improvements we're making. We're up over 2% now, according to the latest Austin Community Survey, in terms of people who are frequently commuting by bike. And in fact, in some areas within the central city and even parts of East Austin, we're upwards of 13% of commuters are frequently commuting by bike. So tremendous progress on that. And in general, placemaking is a much higher priority now. We recognize that to become a more urban place, we're going to have to do a much better job of placemaking in those kinds of destinations that we want to draw people to in order to support transit. On the upper left, you see our City Hall, which has great retail shops on the ground level. That's right on 2nd Street, which is a very nice new urbanist setting right there in the upper right. And down below, you see right there on Congress Avenue, between the Capitol and the river, we've taken parking spaces out in front of a grocery store and turned it into a little street patio. That's been successful enough that other shops right along Congress Avenue want to do the same thing, which is actually no small battle to get past the resistance to giving up parking spaces. So that's actually worked very well. And the future is very bright based on all of this progress. We actually, the one thing that I find most encouraging is that we recently adopted our comprehensive plan, the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan, our first one since about '79, and the principal core principle within the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan is to grow as a compact, connected city. And that has become such a popular buzz phrase that it comes up all the time. In virtually any discussion about an urban issue in Austin, people will make some reference to compact and connected. And that is what is so exciting. We now get it. The Austin community truly gets it. We want to be compact and connected, and we are going to get there. And so I feel very encouraged that we are on the right track. That to come back to Andres Duane's talk, yes, having 200 bars is not urbanism, but with that plan and with everything else we have going on, we are going to demonstrate that having 200 bars is not necessarily fatal to urbanism either. So if you haven't been back to Austin lately, I want to encourage you to consider coming on back, have a margarita, and check out what's going on there, and hopefully you can see some things that might help you along your way towards that urban vision that so many of us share. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Marcy. Thank you all for being here. Good afternoon. I printed out a handout, handed it to some of you, and if you're interested in taking this with you, there's a stack over by the projector. Okay, let's see if I can work this. Start here.
You can also just use this.
Okay. All right, I'm going to start with a little overview about Tucson, which I've described as a not-so-urban oasis in the Sonoran Desert. It's a city of about 500,000 people in the corporate limits, with about just under 1 million in the metro area. We have a very low population density. Our land area is as big as the city of Chicago, but we have 1/6 as many people in that area. That's largely because the cheap land that was available when the city was growing. Most of the population arrived after World War II, when the automobile was really the predominant feature of urban planning and urban form. So Tucson is historically very auto-centric. Economically, we're a very low per capita income city. We're very government and service-oriented economy. When the recession hit a few years ago, we were particularly hard hit because our economy has really been based a lot on just growth, population growth, building houses and furnishing houses for people who are moving to Tucson from the Midwest. And once the housing bubble burst, we really were hit hard. But we're working on some things that are pulling us out of that. And I think we're using downtown development as one of the catalysts for pulling Tucson out of the doldrums. We have a very small downtown because historically, like I said, when downtown was the core of the city, Tucson was only about 20 or 30,000 people. After decades of decline and maybe about 15 years of slow growth, we're really starting to see some significant momentum in downtown revitalization. The catalysts have been restoring historic theaters, restoring our train depot and various historic commercial structures and infrastructure improvements. Most notable of those is the Modern Streetcar, which is a 3.9-mile long route, connects the University of Arizona Medical Center with the main campus, 4th Avenue, shopping and entertainment district, downtown, and the emerging West Side or Mercado. And then the University of Arizona is kind of the big dog in Tucson. It's a Research One university, gets a lot of federal dollars, and they have a combined population of 50,000 students, faculty, and staff. They're located about a mile away from downtown. we've long yearned to have the University of Arizona have more of a downtown presence, and the streetcar is really becoming a catalyst for making that happen. Marcy mentioned the Caterpillar. Oh, that's the next slide. Okay, so here's a view of Tucson from the mountain just west of downtown. You can see in the foreground here, there's a lot of vacant land. This is the west terminus of the streetcar line, and that area was master planned through new urbanist TOD principles, and within the next 5 or 8 years, we're going to see, some of it's not visible here, but you're going to see several like 4 to 6 story apartment buildings and office buildings coming out of the ground out of there. And then here's the Interstate 10. We've built a bridge over this Santa Cruz River, which is a dry wash. We're connecting, the streetcar goes up this way, does a loop, goes under here, goes through the downtown, and you can see these taller buildings off in the distance is the University of Arizona. I happened to take this on our one snowy day in the last 10 years, so Tucson doesn't usually look like this. So the Caterpillar, the intention is to connect downtown and the University of Arizona, our two major dense areas. It's going to be operational in about a year and a half. We funded it through a local half-cent sales tax and a $63 million federal grant. It's going to have 19 stops, and it's really our city's strategic catalyst to urbanize our city center. And we're hoping to get to our transit-oriented development by starting with development-oriented transit. Here's a better view of it. This is that area that was in the foreground, the west side, convention center area. This is the downtown core. Interstate highway, railroad tracks are here. So then the railroad tracks have historically divided downtown from this commercial area called 4th Avenue. And then this is a historic residential district. And then this is the main U of A campus, and then this is the medical center in the northeast terminus. This is a picture of our streetcar that's currently under production in a factory outside of Portland, and we're waiting on the first prototype. We're going to have 8 cars, and to date we haven't seen any. We're going to complete the infrastructure work on the streetcar with the tracks and the overhead power lines and all those things this summer. And then we're going to wait probably another year and maybe a year and a half till we get this thing running, because we're still waiting for the production. Portland's got an order with this company ahead of us, and they've just recently received their first testing vehicles. So downtown, as with many cities, it's the government center for the region, performing arts center. We have about 13,000 employees, almost all of which are government. We have a very weak private office sector. Congress Street is kind of our main street, and that's our entertainment hub, which is really starting to see a critical mass growth in restaurants and bars. Downtown is surrounded by historic neighborhoods, which kind of prevent it from doing a lot of, geographic growth aside from the west side. We are seeing the University of Arizona coming downtown with some academic programs and affiliated student housing. And we have a federally funded intermodal center, which includes Amtrak and our renovated depot, our local bus transit center right on Congress, and the streetcar. And then we have this area called 4th Avenue, which is a very unique sort of local independent type, no chains, unique shops, bars, and restaurants. They have 2 street fairs every year that draw 300,000 people. It's already very pedestrian-oriented, very bicycle-oriented, and includes 3 streetcar stops. But the interesting thing about 4th Avenue is it has a very strong merchants association that for 40 years has resisted paid parking on street. And the merchants always complain about there's never enough parking, and that's because it's free, and so the people that are parking there all day long, because they're high school students or they're college students, or in some cases they're the merchants themselves or their own employees taking up customer parking. This is on the left. You see that's the one of the streetcar stops that was just installed a few weeks ago. You can see it's an area of small shops and sort of thing. On the right, there's the solar-powered pizza place. Okay, now a bit about us. Parkwise is actually a division of our city transportation department. As Marcy mentioned, we manage all the city's parking assets, which include parking structures, surface lots, parking meters in the downtown and around the U of A, but not 4th Avenue. And then we have residential permit programs in 14 neighborhoods that protect those neighborhoods from overflow parking. And we provide enforcement of the parking codes citywide. I can tell you, if you yearn to be popular or well-liked, don't go into the business of managing people who write parking tickets. So, we have an oversight or advisory commission, really, that I work with that's been invaluable. I, as staff, can bring policy to them. They represent all the 3 business districts along the streetcar route and in our primary parking areas. All the neighborhoods are represented through city council appointments, and they've really provided a great buffer between the public and the mayor and council. So the mayor and council really likes having them. And 3 weeks ago, when I went to mayor and council and asked them to approve a parking rate increase for the downtown meters from 50 cents to $1 an hour, I got a 7-0 vote. And while I like to think that was because they had confidence in me and liked my arguments, they also trusted the fact that it had been vetted through this group. When I was on the commission 11 years ago representing downtown, we helped usher in city employee parking. And it's been instrumental in really getting some various necessary but unpopular rate increases through. Parking in downtown, we have about 15,000 spaces, and we control about 42% of them. And of that, 4,600 are surface lots. We control about 960 of those, and we'd like to see them all go away. We'd like to see them all developed with mixed-use developments, and I expect that'll happen in the next 5 or 6 years. We've built 3 garages just since 2005, and all 3 are part of mixed-use transit-oriented developments, all increasingly so as we started with the Pennington Street Garage in 2005. It's got solar panels on the roof and electric vehicle charging stations, 750 parking spaces. The mixed-use element is just that we have a restaurant, but it's a world-class restaurant called Cafe Poca Cosa, which this is the canopy and the patio for them. So they're on the ground floor, and then our parking office is on the other end of that. So it was kind of a start to getting a garage that had some mixed-use components to it. Then in 2009, we opened up the Depot Plaza garage, which is underground. This is the entrance. Sort of kind of a distorted panorama view here, but it's 2 levels, 294 spaces, and what it did, it leveraged the conversion of this building, which was 96 public housing units, into market rate residential, and the construction of 10,000 square feet of retail, which includes a yoga business, smoothie shop, coffee house, restaurant, and a fabulous gallery. And they are all replaced what was a useless little parking area. And this is Congress Street here, so that's our main drag. And then with a federal housing grant, we built this 56-unit public housing to replace some of what we had lost here. And then in this empty lot on top of the garage, we're expecting a 135-room boutique hotel will be built in the next couple of years. And then thirdly, we opened Central Garage in 2011, and that's part of a larger project called Plaza Centro. And what we did, we built the core garage, and then we condominiumized the air rights above and the front of the first floor for retail. So we have a developer who's just completing construction of student apartment units on the top, and then another developer is building 10 or 12,000 square feet of retail and office here. And then across the street, off the view, is another building, 2 buildings with more student housing. And between those, they have 456 student housing units. And so we've got parking, retail, office, housing, and then there's going to be a streetcar stop right there. And it connects with 4th Avenue. So we're proud of that one. Parking rates, I'm not going to go through all these, but just suffice it to say they're very cheap. We've studied other cities, and we're among the cheapest in the country for cities of our size or larger. The main one here is that the on-street is 50 cents an hour, which is about as cheap as you can find anywhere. in the downtown. It's $1 an hour near the U of A. And then we also have where people who live in downtown apartments can pay $48 a year to park at the parking meters. And so those are all going up. That's the same as the residential permit rate. Those are all going up. As far as development requirements for parking, we have a very suburban land use code, but we're changing that around with overlay districts in the downtown area. The infill incentive district that applies just to the downtown core allows developers to build with no off-street parking required. In the greater infill incentive district, which includes 4th Avenue, we allow a 25% reduction of parking requirements, but we are rewriting this, and we're going to be probably a lot more than 25%. We'll probably get it down to 100% or up to 100% reduction. For now, what we do is we'll require individual parking plans where we encourage them to have parking reduction strategies, and for smaller businesses, we'll make arrangements where they'll be required to buy parking validations at our existing garages. So we're trying to maximize use of existing facilities rather than having them create their own parking. And then one of the main things we're trying to do is to just change the mindset about the value of parking. Just like any kind of real estate, it has a value. Free or cheap parking has been viewed as an entitlement. Because the downtown area has been depressed for a while, that has encouraged that. But we're working actively to change this mindset through the gradual elimination of free parking, working towards demand-based pricing, and through education and outreach. And obviously we're linking with the streetcar, which is the catalyst for a lot of the recent investment we're getting. We're seeing 8 new restaurants and bars opening on Congress and 4th Avenue in the next several months. And this is all very incremental. You're changing mindsets, you're changing the way people build and their expectations about investment. We're never going to build another garage box again that's just a garage. If we build any more parking structures, they're all going to be incorporating mixed-use activity. So we're sort of paradoxically trying to do 2 things in Tucson. We're trying to create an urban village along the streetcar route, and we're trying to preserve or create a regional destination. We'd like the downtown to be the downtown of the entire region where people are coming to visit. And as I mentioned, it's auto-centric for the most part. Transit, our local bus system is not used that much by choice riders. So we're encouraging the reduction in car usage for those living and working or going to school within walking or bicycling distance of the streetcar line. But we want to maintain some parking convenience for those visitors from around the region who will continue to drive the downtown. So we anticipate there'll be a growth in total demand for parking, but we're encouraging a reduction in per capita demand. Some of the strategies that I mentioned, we're reducing the per capita parking demand by new and existing area residents. We're pricing the on-street parking to encourage use of off-street facilities for longer-term parking, to encourage turnover to benefit the businesses, and to discourage cruising for available parking. We're encouraging visitors who are arriving by car to park once and use the streetcar or simply walk, and we're going to be packaging the parking fees with streetcar fares. And drilling down to the tactical level, student housing developments, we're seeing a lot of those in the downtown area. We're encouraging them, as Chris mentioned with Austin, unbundling the rents from the parking fees so that those who choose not to bring a car won't be subsidizing those who are. We're requiring they all have active parking reduction plans, transit passes, bicycle parking, car sharing programs, and discouraging them from using the neighborhood streets for student and guest parking overflow. And then we're working directly with those neighborhoods to empower them to control their streets through the use of expanded residential permit programs, bringing meters into some of those areas that are adjacent to the commercial districts. One of the major hills I've got to climb this year is bringing the introduction of paid on-street parking to 4th Avenue. We're shooting for January 2014. We're seeing a reduction of 43% of our on-street parking in the downtown core streetcar streets because of the streetcar. And so with the increasing demand and the reduced supply, this seems like a good time to use supply and demand as another reason for increasing the rates. We want to encourage pedestrian activity, obviously, through implementation of streetscape design standards, and we're also working on means for funding the streetscape improvements. So by this time next year, we will have increased the downtown meter rates from 50 cents to $1 an hour. I like to call it from dirt cheap to still cheap. That'll take effect next April. We're going to be extending the days that paid parking is in place around the university to include the weekends, and we're going to be implementing the paid system around the 4th Avenue. So those are three very tangible things we're doing in the three business districts to make parking seen as more of a valuable asset rather than just sort of a free entitlement. In the short run, we're providing inexpensive off-street parking and surface lots for 4th Avenue businesses and downtown businesses to start weaning them away from the free on-street parking they've enjoyed at the expense of their customers. This is an example of the incremental approach, because in the short run, we're using that as a tactic to get the buy-in, to get the meters in place on 4th Avenue. In a slightly longer run, we want the surface lots to go away entirely because we want the density, we want the mixed-use activity that brings more people and pedestrians. And then we're also installing smart meters and multi-space pay stations in that area. We have a very antiquated coin-only meter system, and we may have areas where we don't have meters at all, but we'll be using pay by smartphone only to reduce the need for the infrastructure. Also, by this time next year, we'll have begun the process of discouraging on-street parking by downtown residents and employees, instituted a car-sharing program both in our garages and on street, upgraded the systems in our garages, which is antiquated, to make the customer experience more pleasant. We'll be participating in a process of overhauling our off-street private development parking requirements. We'll be planning for possibly incorporating public parking with new mixed-use development at various points along the streetcar corridor. And then I mentioned this August, we're going to have 456 students moving into downtown, and that's going to be a big impact. And then we're also going to be working with transportation staff and other stakeholders to develop a policy on parklets. We're seeing a lot of restaurants and bars who are interested in extending the curb lines out. Eliminates parking permanently on street, but it creates an area for them to provide on the sidewalk dining, which is something we value, but we need a policy. We don't have a fee structure yet for that. And then a little bit longer term, we want to see all the surface lots developed. We're going to institute demand-based pricing at the meters, something that we can't do technically today, but this is going to be possible through the technology we're installing this year. Also, because we'll have sensors, we'll be able to see when and where people are parking, and which will give us some insights into where and when it makes sense to extend the hours of paid parking into evenings and possibly weekends downtown. And then we're going to continue to strive for maximizing the use of our existing facilities through pricing and active management. We're going to encourage a variety of mode choices besides cars. We're going to reduce the need for car storage through car sharing. And while we see more cars parking in the area, we'll be parking them more efficiently and with better integration in an overall transportation network. We'll see that parking spaces on street will turn over more quickly to better serve the businesses and their customers, which will contribute to the vitality of the area. A little bit further down the road, we're going to be connecting to Phoenix through intercity passenger rail. That'll come right downtown to our restored historic depot. And then the streetcar, even though it's not in operation yet, we're already planning for the expansion of the system. So we're going to be extending the streetcar into a regional rail system that incorporates light rail, perhaps bus rapid transit, connecting with bicycle boulevards and other infrastructure. And that's it. Thanks for your time. This is our website, our Facebook page. Feel free to like our Facebook page. We could use some more likers. The TucsonStreetcar.com page is an excellent resource, and there's my email address, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Deb. Here, thanks.
All right, while Marcy's queuing me up, you guys want to stand up and do a little neck roll maybe? And come on, one more, you can do it, power through. Also, if I see you sleeping, I'm going to point this laser in your eyes, so don't even think about it. Okay, I'll make this fun, have lots of good photos, and then we can all go party. Okay, so my name is Emily Yetman. I'm with an advocacy organization in Tucson called Living Streets Alliance, and we're relatively new. We've been around about 2.5 years, and I was actually really surprised and excited when Marcy invited me to come talk today, because I was like, oh wow, I guess we're doing something right if she invited me. And I was thinking about this topic and really like, okay, well, what is our piece in all of this? How do we fit in? And so kind of my theme for this topic is really that one mode does not fit all. And so I'll talk about that a little bit more, but really the role of an advocacy organization in all of this, and the vision of CNU, and how education and advocacy can really help people connect the dots between all of these things. So bear with me, we'll get through this. So to start you off, I've got a really exciting photo.
Ugliest street in downtown.
Yes, so we've probably all got one of these, right? We've got this street in the heart of our city that sits empty everything but from 9 to 5 during the week. And so you heard Donovan mention that we're actually, I think, the 6th poorest city of our size in the U.S. So think about this. This is a resource, right? Like how much of our taxpayer money goes into maintaining this space that does nothing else for us but move cars. So, you know, I heard a quote once and I really like it. It says, the result of designing a city based on the needs of cars results in a city that only cars would want to live in. So I think, you know, that's kind of what we've got right here. And you know, this happens in our neighborhoods too. This is really close to downtown as well. This happens to be in front of my house. We've got big infrastructure that's a leak on our system, and it's creating urban heat island. And what's missing from this picture? I mean, there's a lot of things, but what's really missing from this picture? People, like where are they? This is a neighborhood. So this is really where LSA grew out of, for me personally, is realizing this disconnect, because I talked to our pedestrian bicycle program manager a couple years ago when I was in grad school, and I was like, why is it that our infrastructure is this way? Why does it look this way? And he said, you know, Emily, I go in and I talk to neighborhoods, I meet with neighborhoods, I talk to people, and I hear what they want. And you all know what they want, right? And he said, but that's not what gets built. And so I had this aha moment of like, there's this disconnect happening where the citizens want something and it's not what gets built. And why? And it's because there was not a collective voice. There was not a way of raising and elevating this need and this conversation. So that's kind of where we're coming out of for Living Streets Alliance. How many of you guys are familiar with advocacy organizations like this? Just show of hands. I see a couple of you, very timid little hands. Be proud. So this is kind of just a basic diagram that I like, that I've seen used a couple places, that shows that we're basically the carrot and the stick. So we're really like coaxing and patting on backs and like rewarding decision makers for making good decisions, and showing them like, no, there is support. You can do this. We're going to hold your hand. But then at the same time, if they you know, aren't making good decisions, we can say, no, really, this is important. And we also do the same thing, kind of back it to the public in the same way, where we're educating and we're holding hands and saying, you know, trust your elected officials, trust agency staff, because there are a lot of people that do want to do good work, and they need your support. So that's kind of where we fit in all of this. So this is our mission, and there's some really good keywords in here. It's kind of a lengthy mission, but you can see we're talking about health. We're talking about streets as promoting health. We're talking about streets as empowering people, right? So streets as being very essential social spaces that connect us to one another. And then streets as vibrant places, so places that are public, where we can walk, bike, socialize, play, so on and so forth. So a lot of what I do in my work is go out and just talk about this a lot, like I'm talking to you guys now. And I recognize that this is going to be a lot of preaching to the choir, but I'll just go through this really quickly, and feel free to chime in if you notice things that I'm forgetting to mention. But I talk a lot about safety and accessibility, and how a lot of the design that we have right now prioritizes one mode. And you can literally feel if you're a person coming along the sidewalk here and the sidewalk ends, what do? We've designed things, we've implemented things that say if you're not in a car, you don't matter. And so, you know, that's pretty strong versus places in other parts of the country, other parts of the world where every mode user, I think that sounds right, mode user is elevated to the same level. So they're all responsible for their actions. They're all accountable and responsive and respectful of other modes. And this really levels the playing field and makes everyone a part of this public space. This is a very common scene in Tucson. This happens to be in February, and you can see like the little person back here trying to gather the shade from like a telephone pole because they're already hot, and it's only February, and you know it's going to get really hot come right now, basically. So we talk about streets as, you know, starting to create microclimates for us. They can be great microclimates. They can be horrible like this. And the need for our streets to be comfortable and shaded and accessible again. Something more like this, you know, where you've got space for everyone in the same right-of-way. You've got places to linger and sit and watch. You've got shade. You've got interesting things going on to look at. You've got tons of different people out, all ages and abilities. And one of the things that we really do is use the streets as a lens to talk about these kind of larger issues that exist, that we're working towards improving through the vision of CNU and through LSA. So issues of accessibility and the need for our cities to accommodate people who are 80 and people who are 8 and everyone in between. At some point in our life, we'll all be disabled, and I think that's something that we don't really think about very much. And I've also heard a statistic, too, you probably all heard this, that at any point in time, about a third of us in any community aren't driving, right? We either can't drive, we don't want to drive, we don't have a car, we're too young, we're too old. So at any point in time, like, there's a third of our population that, in some of those photos I just showed you, are not being served. So, again, we talk about this stuff a lot. And safety, health is huge. It's been really exciting to see this bridge, the gap starting to be bridged between health and transportation and the impacts that transportation has on health. And you know, it was interesting. I was talking to someone just the other day with the College of Public Health, and she, you know, I always think about health as like, well, yes, there's individual health that we're working on, right? Right, if you walk, you're going to be healthier, or if everyone walks, then we're going to have cleaner air, and so on and so forth. But she was talking about this whole thing of climate change, and what are we going to do if we're in Tucson in the middle of summer and our grid goes down because it's too hot, because we have urban heat island, and people are isolated, and they can't connect, and they don't have AC, and it was really interesting. I hadn't thought about it in that lens before, but that's, again, like one more thing that we can change with the way we design and build our street network. And of course, economy, I don't think I need to go into this at all, because how many of you have dived into Jeff Speck's book, which Marcy mentioned earlier? Hands. I'm in love with it. I wish he was here. I'd give him a big hug right now. so many great reasons for the economy of our cities to be designing our streets in a better way. And then really, really what it all boils down to, and this is the thing that people really start to identify with, is that transportation can be placemaking, ready, go, or it can be place breaking, and it's supposed to say, oh, there it is, place breaking. So you've got places that are, you know, really starting to define place and city and community, or places that I don't even know how to describe what's happening there on the right. And you've probably seen something comparable to this. This is really the kind of the essence of what we're talking about is what happens when you start to shift the way you use your streets. Look at the amount of space that's then freed up for other amazing, wonderful, beautiful things to happen. This is a diagram, or an infographic, I guess, of 60 people using 60 people using different types of transportation. And so you've got 60 people and 60 cars on the left. You see that takes up tons of space. You've got 60 people on a bus in the middle, and then 60 people on bikes on the right. And so you really can see, like, look at all the potential for things to happen in that space that's then freed up when we don't all have to get into our individual automobiles. And what I really like about this photo that I hadn't really thought about until just now is, like, look how many people are lining this street because they're like, ooh, what's going on? And, you know, they're there to, like, spectate, and that's a really important function of streets right there. So, anyways, again, preaching to the choir, but stuff I get very excited about. So, our work is, as an advocacy organization, is we create a vision and share it. Exactly what I'm doing right now. Education, that's a huge piece of what we do because we hear about planning a lot, right? Like coming up with plans and implementing plans, but education, like you can do a number of things with infrastructure, but if people don't know how to use it, you're not going to be very successful. We also do really exciting events, so tactical urbanism type stuff, and of course advocating. And I wanted to talk a little bit about a campaign that we're doing right now because I think it's a really strong campaign and there's some really good lessons learned from it. This is a pedestrian safety and comfort campaign, and we've realized that walking is really the hook. As Marcy mentioned, it's this way because we're already all doing it, right? We can all identify as pedestrians even if we don't usually do so. So this has been a really good way to begin this conversation with the broader public. And so we came up with this set of initiatives to really try and look at walkability from all angles and what is it going to take to get us there, because we're, you know, a southwestern city and it's hot and sprawling, but we can do it. I really think we can do it. And so this is something we've designed to work from both the top down and the bottom up. So I'll just walk you through it really quickly. So first thing we did was we realized we needed better policies. So we've been pushing for establishing a pedestrian advisory committee so that the public has an interface with the city to provide feedback and vice versa. And it creates a really good open way of doing that, and accountability, which is essential because we've received a lot of lip service in the past. We've done walk-in talks with Peter Lagerwey where we invited business owners, city council members, and local stakeholders to come walk downtown and look at our streets and talk about what would make them more walkable. And then we did a pedestrian forum with that same group of stakeholders to talk about what that would look like. These are really cool. Neighborhood walking audits. We just started a pilot program earlier this year, and it was a really opportune thing in that Tucson is being sued for ADA noncompliance, which is actually a good thing. And what it means is that they have to, you know, come up with a plan. And the first thing they have to do is take that 3,000 miles of linear roadway in the city of Tucson proper and inventory everything, right? So amazing amount of work. We totally don't have the resources as a city to do that. And so we said, why don't you, let's try something. Why don't we try these neighborhood walking assessments where we go in and we can get mobilize citizens to help us gather some of this information. And at the same time, we're engaging them and thinking about walkability, and we're actually crafting this tool in a way that they're going to get excited about walkability. So in the future, they will support measures, bonds, and things like that that will provide funding for making these improvements. So those have been really cool, and if you don't do that in your own city, I encourage you to look into them. They're really effective. Community walking promotion, there's a lot of bicycle promotion, I find, and support in other cities, including ours. But walking has kind of been the forgotten redheaded stepchild, and I suppose I shouldn't say that because I'm a redhead. But anyways, so we're trying to come up with new tools to make it easier for people to walk. So this is things like walking maps, where you're showing everything within a certain walking distance. Having walking promotion month, things like that that are going to aid people and get them excited about walking. The other thing that's happening is our regional council is updating their pedestrian plan from 2001, so that is really outdated plan. And what we realize, that is the only plan in our entire region, and the problem with it is that it only looks at major arterials and collectors. And if you're a pedestrian, where do you start walking from? Anyone? Start walking from home, right? So this does not get into neighborhoods, which is the place most of us think of walking first. So we've been working with them to try and create a more comprehensive plan, something that could, eventually work like what they're doing in San Francisco right now with their green connectors network that they're coming up with, so that we're making it easy for people to walk from basically anywhere in the city to where they need to go. And then again, gathering pledges of support, so that when opportunities come up, we've got a whole army of people that will say, yes, I support walking, I support this measure, or I support this city council member, I support this staff member in what they want to do, which I think is really important, because I will say that when I finished grad school, I was really excited, like, okay, I'm ready, I'm going to go start designing all this stuff and like fix all the ills of the city. And then I realized, like, the work's not there because there's not a will for it to be there yet. And so I think this kind of work is really important for cultivating that. And then lastly, recognition is key. So we are a gold bicycle-friendly community, and that has been something that people have really gravitated towards. And so they now have a walk-friendly communities ranking that you can go after, very similar. So this is yet another tool for getting various constituents on board. So quick takeaways, make it fun. As much as you can make the things that you're doing fun, you're gonna get people on board. And that's what we try and do in everything we do, the fun factor. Make it social. I think, how many of you went to either one of the tactical urbanism or the urban freeway removal sessions this week? Yeah, so right, so people, especially in the Southwest, are so isolated, and they are so hungry for chance encounter and for meaningful interaction. And so the more you can do, kind of create these scenarios where people can meet, the better off you're gonna be. Certainly collaborate. I don't think I need to tell you any of that. And then a big thing, messaging is huge. And the more we can take away the stereotypes of who uses transit or who rides a bike or who walks, the better off we'll be. Same with getting rid of this perception of all or nothing. And what I mean by that is most of us grew up getting in a car. And so when somebody says, oh, you should start riding your bike, your first mentality is, oh, I can't because I can't ride my bike everywhere. And we have this like ingrained thing in our head, in our psyche of like, it's all one or nothing. And so the more you can chip away at people's perceptions of transit and say, try one trip, like one trip a week. If you just are going to get your kid from school, maybe you can walk. If you're going for another kind of trip, maybe transit's good for that. And these are the little changes that start to help people make this big change eventually. And then I have to give a plug, lastly, to say support your local advocacy organization if you've got one in your town, because we are passionate about this stuff, and we need the expertise of people like you to help push this forward. I know I can speak for us, but we certainly always need board members, we need volunteers, we need help with graphic this and that, or design, or any number of things. But Shannon Scutari, I'm really excited. She was one of the plenaries this morning. She just joined our board, and it's going to bring a lot of knowledge and expertise, and it's a great thing to be involved in. And just in case you don't have one in your city, there is an organization based in DC that exists specifically to support these organizations. So they're a great resource if you think you want to start one. Okay, see, tried to make that exciting.